What are you expecting from Kyle Filipowski as he gets set for his sophomore season playing basketball for the Duke Blue Devils? Can he repeat his success? We'll talk about that and more on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson, and it's so great to have you here with us on this Thursday, June 15th, 2023. Excited to be talking about everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. A big congratulations this week to Jack White on winning the NBA championship with the Denver Nuggets. Of course, getting claimed by the Nuggets prior to the season. He went back and forth between the G League and the NBA level. Did not play in the postseason, but will walk away with an NBA championship ring. Marty Nesposius, the former Duke Blue Devil basketball player as well, was in the scouting department for Denver, so he earns a championship ring, a really fun NBA season for the former Duke Blue Devils. We'll talk about that again in the future. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to our podcast for free wherever you get your podcasts. Also watch the show on YouTube each and every day. Hit that subscribe button as well. Follow us on Twitter at LO_Blue Devils, and I'm on Twitter at _JJ_Jackson_. Without further ado, very excited to bring on my good pal, Kevin Connelly, the site expert from Durham, who's kind enough to join us here on the program today. Kevin, certainly do appreciate the time. I hope you're doing well, my friend.
I'm doing good, JJ. How about you?
I can't complain. Excited to talk about the Duke basketball team. Of course, we're a ways away from the start of the basketball season. We are less than 100 days away from kickoff to the college football season. So once we get into the college football season, we know that the hoops calendar is right around the corner, and we know that the Duke basketball team is going to have pretty high expectations going into year two for Jon Scheyer. Not as much chatter around the transfer portal the last few weeks. It feels as though Duke feels pretty confident with the 12 scholarship players that they have going into the season. So where do you sit with this Duke basketball team as we're recording here in the middle of June?
Well, the expectation is still the same. They're going to be preseason number one or preseason number two. Like we talked about in previous weeks, it's always championship or bust with the Duke Blue Devils. But I still have my concerns about that center position. Seems like they're confident Kyle Filipowski, if needed, can play that 5 role, and they could put 4 quality players around him and see what happens. But I think Ernest Udeh Jr. would have been the icing on the cake. It didn't happen, so now we'll have to see how things pan out for the rest of the summer and then into practice in September.
Yeah, many questions to debate, discuss with the Duke basketball team as we do gear up for the next season, the second year that Jon Scheyer is going to be head coach and the second year that Kyle Filipowski will be on the roster. So let's just get right to it. Let's answer some of those questions that folks have sort of thrown our way. Can Kyle Filipowski repeat his success as a sophomore? Of course, the freshman year, that was pretty good. ACC Rookie of the Year, all ACC honors, the best player on Duke's team a season ago. Can Flip repeat what he did as a freshman?
I think he can. I think he really can. I think he's shown that ability. I think you're going to have that natural progression from your first to your second year in college basketball that, quite frankly, we don't see that often because a lot of guys, if they have productive first seasons like Kyle Filipowski did, they're off to the NBA. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how he progresses from year one to year two. Not to harp on the point, but I do think not having a true shot blocking 5 behind him per se, or next to him, maybe the better term, will hurt him. I'm interested to see if he has to play the center position more, does that tend him to potentially picking up some more fouls and getting in more foul trouble in a game? I think that's a question that eventually needs to be had. But other than that, in terms of points, rebounds, I think you're going to see him shoot better from 3-point range. Everything else, though, I think you're going to see stay the same or slightly increase.
Yeah, and so for that reason, you do feel pretty good about him repeating the success that he had as a freshman going into his sophomore season. And as you mentioned, if anything, maybe some of those numbers get a little bit better. It was the shooting numbers from the outside, 28% from three-point range in his freshman year that you would love to see improve, because it was much better at the start of the year. As it wore on, the three-point shot kind of declined for Filipowski. And so if that is something that's able to improve going into next season, not only could he repeat the success that he had, he could also get a little bit better, Kevin. And I think that's likely what we'll see from Filipowski.
Yeah, and you're expecting him to be in the National Player of the Year conversation into late January and mid-February. You're expecting him to be one of those, 5 to 7 guys maybe that's really in the race for that award, given how he performed as a freshman and that he comes back as a sophomore. And he's got the rest of basically the starting 5 back as well. So expectations are there for this Duke team. Now it's time to see how they're going to perform.
I reckon that we will have him in kind of preseason All-American conversations, certainly preseason ACC awards. He was ACC Rookie of the Year a season ago. I don't think there's any reason why you couldn't foresee a world in which Flip is the ACC Player of the Year altogether. And then, of course, he knows kind of his ultimate goal is to play at the next level in the NBA. And I think if he's able to even just repeat the success, even if he doesn't get better, if he just puts another year out there doing what he did this past season, I think he's ultimately going to be a player the NBA teams really want to draft, because they're going to be able to see that he duplicated what he did as a freshman, and that was a pretty good basketball player.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point with preseason All-American teams and so on and so forth. It's going to be interesting to see who the ACC Player of the Year, or preseason Player of the Year is, excuse me. Obviously, last year it went to Armando Bacot. Everyone thought he was going to be just about the greatest player in the country. Didn't turn out to be that for him or the year for Carolina. Now, Kyle Filipowski, the Rookie of the Year, comes back. Bacot's still in the league. You got other talented players around the ACC as well. It's going to be interesting to see who arbitrarily gets that ACC Preseason Player of the Year award.
Let's see what other questions we've got for this Duke men's basketball team right now in mid-June. We'll answer those after our first time out here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our good friends over at Birddogs. I absolutely love our friends at Birddogs. They've got the best product that you could ever imagine. They hooked us up. The Locked On Show hosts were able to help us make look good with Birddogs. They stretch khaki shorts that are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Birddog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. They fit way better than regular shorts that are made of stiff, restricting cotton. They fix the issue by reinventing cotton cloud knit fabric that makes it look just like khaki, but stretches so you look way slimmer in the fit without having to sacrifice movement. Birddogs use the anti-stink sweat-wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long, and that's something that I really do appreciate. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege and enter promo code LOCKEDONCollege for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You don't want to take your bird dogs off. We promise you that. Birddogs is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. We move forward here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. JJ Jackson alongside my pal Kevin Connelly, the site expert for Ball Durham. Tell me about balldurham.com this time of year, Kevin.
Well, we got a lot of off-season coverage. Basically what we're doing now, previewing Duke basketball stuff, getting ready for Duke football. You can follow us on Twitter at ball_Durham. And you could also read us just about every day at balldurham.com. It's Duke basketball never sleeps, and we got a ton of Duke basketball coverage for you. Recruiting-wise, obviously, the EYBL circuit is off and running. Peach Jam coming up in a couple of weeks. So we still got a ton of coverage, and then obviously players filtering in and out now for off-season workouts, and then eventually in about a month and a half or so, they'll be on campus full-time for the fall semester.
Yeah, we saw a lot of guys there for K Academy in Duke gear. Now they're getting a couple of weeks back at home, a couple of days at home before they come back and get set for the upcoming season. So, we'll be following your work for sure over at balldurham.com. Let's keep going. Let's talk about the Duke team going into next season. We mentioned if Filipowski can repeat his success going into the new year as a sophomore. What about Duke as a whole on the glass, Kevin? This Duke basketball team was really impressive the entire season, rebounding the basketball. Offensively, defensively, the rebounding margin. I mean, you name it, they did a really nice job rebounding the basketball last year. Despite the poor shooting numbers, they were aided by good efforts on the glass. Will they dominate the boards again next season?
I'm going to say no.
Okay.
Not as well as they did this year. And I think just the void at that center position, losing Derek Lively and hoping to replace him with what I'd assume would be Christian Reeves, I don't think he's going to live up to that standard basically in his first full year playing. Now, he did play last year, played sparingly, didn't really get any meaningful minutes. So, truth be told, we don't know if he's going to get that many meaningful minutes this year. If he does, I don't think he's going to live up to the type of effort Derek Lively put in on the glass. Now, with that being said, Kyle Filipowski is a good rebounder. Mark Mitchell is a very good rebounder. Tyrese Proctor, for how big he is a good rebounder. Ryan Young is that YMCA old school type game where you don't think he's getting rebounds, but somehow he corrals them and pulls them down. So I do think they'll be okay on the glass. I don't think rebounding is going to be this major glaring hole or weakness for this team, but I just don't think they're going to dominate the glass like they did a season ago.
What about if Duke shoots better, Kevin, right? We talk about how great they were on the offensive glass. Think about that. If we're making shots, if the three-point numbers do improve, what does that mean? There aren't as many rebounds to grab.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Now you're hoping to be a better shooting team. Jaden Shoot as a sophomore, Jared McCain coming in as a freshman, Caleb Foster. You're hoping Tyrese Proctor and Kyle Filipowski, like we mentioned, take those next steps and improve their three-point game. And obviously, we've yet to mention Jeremy Roach, who comes back for his senior season. So you're hoping this is going to be a better shooting team than last year. And if that's the case, you don't need Derek Lively down there to be banging around and trying to grab all these loose offensive boards.
That being said, rebounding will be something that Duke needs to stay dominant in, if possible, right? I do agree with you because I think the shooting numbers will improve. There won't be as many rebounds to grab. Lively leaving absolutely hurts in that regard, but I think Filipowski's going to do a fine job once again on the boards. Let's not forget the number of consecutive double-doubles that guy had to begin his freshman season at Duke. Sean Stewart's going to do a good number of rebounding there on the inside for this Duke team, a freshman coming into the mix. And Ryan Young, like you said, he put himself in the right position at the right time to grab those rebounds. So while they might not quite dominate, I do think Duke's going to be a fine rebounding team going into the new season, and I'd love for people to let us know what they think in the comments below. Give me another thought on what you're expecting out of the rebounding efforts from this Duke team.
Well, I think when you brought up Sean Stewart, I didn't mention him. That was a really good point. Again, listed like that 6'9", 6'10". You don't really see that playing center. At least I don't. Could he? Absolutely. So I think him and Christian Reeves are maybe the biggest off-the-radar X factors for Duke coming into the next season.
Locked On Blue Devils here today. JJ Jackson alongside my pal Kevin Connelly, the site expert for Ball Durham. We're talking questions that might still remain for this Duke team going into the new season. We've talked about Kyle Filipowski. We've talked about the rebounding efforts for this Duke team. What about Mark Mitchell, another player going into his sophomore season, returning for the Blue Devils? Questions here is, how much of an offensive factor will Mark Mitchell be? What say you? How much of an offensive factor will Mark Mitchell be in his sophomore season?
Well, he was the X factor as a freshman. I don't have the exact stat in front of me, but I think it was Duke was undefeated or only lost one game this season when he scored double figures. I mean, that's how important he was. When Mark Mitchell scored, Duke won. So that's going to have to be the same case now as a sophomore. And again, you're anticipating that natural progression, that he gets a little bit more comfortable. He gains a little bit more confidence in his shot. Now, he would take those corner threes, wouldn't take them often, but when he did, he would make them. So you want him to become that secondary scorer. You're assuming that Kyle Filipowski, Tyrese Proctor, and Jeremy Roach are going to be like your 1A line of scorers. You need Mark Mitchell to be that B line. You need him to be on that 2 line to help you score because you don't want to put so much pressure on the freshman in Power and I was going to say Roach, Power and McCain and Foster, and then you don't know what you're going to get out of Jaden Schutt in terms of how many minutes he's even going to play, and Ryan Young's not your scoring type big man. So Mark Mitchell needs to be an offensive factor for this Duke team, who, let's be honest, yes, they're adding some really good young talent, but they're pretty much running it back from last year and a team that struggled to score. It was their defense that helped them win a lot of games, not their offense. So everyone needs to take a step up in their offensive production going into next season.
How much of an offensive factor will Mark Mitchell be? I think he'll be more efficient, Kevin, but I don't know that the role really changes all that much. I think you'll see him personally be a little bit more aggressive and assertive, which is exactly what Duke needs. But when you've got Tyrese Proctor, who I really think is going to be a massive offensive factor for the Blue Devils with his ability to drive and kick, Roach's scoring ability that we've seen, and then, like we mentioned, Kyle Filipowski returning for a sophomore season. There are only so many shots to go around, right? There are only so many points to be scored in a basketball game. So how much of a factor will Mark Mitchell be? I still think he's 4 or 5 spots down the scoring board for Duke when you're just projecting what the year could be. However, I do think he's more aggressive this year and more efficient going into his sophomore season, which is a great thing for this Duke team because they don't need him to be that much of an offensive factor given all the talent around him.
And listen, I'm not calling Duke a super team right now like you see in the NBA with these super teams and fill in the blank, but like there's only one basketball to go around, and it feels like each guy on those NBA super teams have their X amount of shots for the night. If you look at the Brooklyn Nets of last year, this year, kind of with the Kyrie Irving, James Harden, Kevin Durant, it was like, all right, those 3 guys are going to shoot the basketball 75% of the time throughout the game. And then your other guys, when they got their chance, they needed to make those shots, or they were going to go on the bench, or more shots were going to go to the top 3 guys. So I think that's what you're going to kind of see with Duke this year, with those top 3 guys of Jeremy Roach, Tyrese Proctor, and Kyle Filipowski are going to get probably anywhere in a game between 65 to 75% of the shots. And you're going to have the other guys, the role players, plus Mark Mitchell, be very efficient in the shots that they get if they want to see their number called a little bit more often in the flow of the offense.
Do you agree with me, Kevin? Let's use the word aggressive, assertive, confident, not how much of an offensive factor. Let's kind of shift the question there. Do you think we'll see a more aggressive version of Mark Mitchell offensively going into the new season?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a conversation him and John Shire have to have. And again, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but Duke was, I'm just going to throw out this number, say 16-1 when Mark Mitchell scored in double figures. And John Shire has to put it bluntly, be like, here you go. When you score, we won last year. We need you to score again this year so we can win and take pressure off some of the other guys who are going to be our double-digit average scorers, which I think Mark Mitchell can be. I think he can be anywhere in the 8 to 10 points per game range, throwing in about 7 rebounds as well. I think he can be one of those type players for Duke this season.
And if he is that type of player for Duke, the sky is certainly going to be the limit for what this team can accomplish going into the new season. They're still going to have those primary scorers ahead of him, as we mentioned, in Roach and Proctor, Filipowski, so to speak. But if you get just a little bit more of offensive success from Mark Mitchell, man, we talked about the struggles of the offense this past season. I don't know that we're going to be having those same conversations this year because much like the rebounding, there are not going to be as many boards to grab. I think that's going to be because this team's going to be scoring more points. The offense as a whole will also improve going into the new season. What, you agree?
I do. And also you look at the fact John Shire now has a full year under his belt as a head coach. Like he was never the one drawing up the plays and calling the sets and running the actions before. So now he has a full season under his belt, and you hope that he's a little bit more comfortable in knowing what he wants his team to run and when. I think that's something that got talked about a little bit last year, but not certainly as much probably as it should have. And I think that'll contribute to the offensive success and improvement from last year's team.
We're taking a look at this Duke basketball team going into the new season. I'm trying to look at for the number myself, Kevin, and I think it might have been, you're right there, 17-1 that Duke was when Mark Mitchell scored in double figures. So let's see if they could do that once again this upcoming season. So a lot of fun conversing with you here today. As we said, we've got more topics and conversations to tackle throughout the course of the offseason. Give me one more plug for Ball Durham, if you will.
Well, you could read us at balldurham.com and then follow us on Twitter at ball_Durham for all your Duke athletic wants and needs.
Appreciate the time, Kevin. We'll talk again next week, okay?
Thanks, JJ.
All right, that's Kevin Connelly, the site expert for Ball Durham, joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. That's going to do it for our show today. Coming up tomorrow, our good pal Isaac Trotter from 24/7 Sports will be back with us. We continue the Duke basketball conversations with him coming up on tomorrow's show. That'll do it for today's show. Thanks so much for watching and listening. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.